Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and I got a couple European nightcrawler worm bins that I'd like to feed. Both of these systems were started in early June. They're only about a week apart as far as their ages are concerned. They're the ones right behind me. Let me show you. They're on the shelf. They're now on the top shelf because yesterday I had retired a bin. So these two sort of slid up into the second and third positions. Now there's only one other bin besides my European night crawlers that's older. But soon that'll be gone too, and these will be my two oldest bins. They're both over 100 days old. I believe they're maybe 137 and 130 days of age, if I'm not mistaken. Hey Siri, how many days have passed since the 1st of June?
It was 137 days ago.
Yeah, that's right. So 130 and 137 days of age. It was last time we checked in, it was 9 days ago when we last checked in, that the younger bin, the one over here, received its, I believe, 12th feeding, possibly its 13th feeding or whatever. And in the case of the older bin, it had received its 15th feeding. And over the past, I don't know, couple bins that I've finished off, I've been kind of using the 15th feeding as the indicator to say that it's time to switch from everyday composting and start steering the bin towards migration and harvest. And that's pretty much what happened last time we checked in here. Both systems were fed coffee, but we sort of treated this one's feeding as its final feeding, with the intention of us, next time coming in here, not to feed them both, maybe to feed the younger one, but at best, just to check in on how things are progressing in here, but leaving it to be so that the worms can forage and, break down all the little residual stuff that remains in the bin. So I'm going to get these up on the bench so we can see how they're coming along. So let me put on a glove and we can get right to work. Here we've got our older bin, the one that we don't intend to feed, the one that we're just checking in on, to see how things are coming along. The only thing that I sometimes think about when I'm running a bin in this so-called foraging mode is that even though they're not getting fresh food, I should be maybe trying to tend to the moisture level in the bin. Since no fresh food's going in, you don't have that thawing of the frozen stuff, because I usually feed frozen stuff pretty damp when it starts to thaw out, starts to expel a lot of liquid. And since there's been no feedings of that sort, like I said before, this bin received only coffee last time, something that wouldn't have been frozen and wouldn't thaw out and kick out moisture. So, like I was saying, sometimes I think that in a bin like this, I should be doing something to try to deal with the moisture level so that all this stuff out on the top surface can also possibly get a little bit more attention than just sitting out here and being dry. Because those few pieces of paper that I had covering things here, they they hold the moisture in pretty good, but those things on the very top surface do tend to dry out a little bit. So what we did last time was we collected all of this top surface material and put it into a little pile on the side, and I figured let's do it again today. And I was already starting to rummage down into the feeding area when I was reminded that we would probably want to do that again here today. Because what I did with all this dry stuff was I took it at the end and I piled it down into this little hole that we had created to make sure that all of it is beneath the surface of this material. Because this material's got a good moisture level. If you place something inside of it, it'll absorb that moisture. So that's my idea for this stuff. And that's exactly what I did with the stuff that I fished off the top surface last time too. I had placed it down into the hole, and then on top of that, I believe, is where we had put the coffee. You could usually distinguish coffee from castings. It's got a slightly different kind of texture, I believe, and slightly different color in a way. So I thought that I'd be able to pretty easily tell how much coffee was left over once I came in here. I don't know if it's possible to tell, but I mean, to me, this little chunk of material right here Seems so much finer than the castings material. See, to me, this seems like this is just a little chunk of leftover coffee. And it had a slightly different color to it. I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up, but it did have a slightly different color to it as well. So let's see, we're bumping into some of the old food items that had been in this bin. This mango seed must have been fed in this bin months ago, and it's been ravaged for the most part, so the seed that was inside was gobbled up. For whatever reason, the worms just really enjoy the inside of one of these things. Typically, you'll find at least a worm or two inside of it. But something like that is not going to break down between now and the end of this bin's foraging and migration. That thing would just sit in here. So it'll get hauled out at some point. This one looks like it might be a little further along. I mean, I think a little chunk of it just tore off because I applied a little tiny bit of pressure to it. It just seems smaller overall in size too. It's like it's been whittled down in a way, so I'll put it right there next to the other one. But that too, even despite its pretty advanced stage of being broken down, isn't definitely not going to be broken down by the time we want to start migrating the worms out of this material. Because if this bin is now foraging, and if we don't feed it today, then the last feeding it received 9 days ago will be its start of the foraging. And I really do wonder how long it'll take for this process to possibly break down all these little lingering bits of material that I'd like to see composted down. The moisture, The moisture is something that I feel we should be able to play with, even if we've decided no more food for this bin. It does seem like if giving the bin a little bit of moisture here and there would, give us better results on the breakdown of the remaining bits of stuff in here, then I think it would be worthwhile to use the moisture to reach that goal. Because so far everything that we've piled up over here onto this little stack here is stuff that's relatively dry or still has a good amount of time left to reach its broken down state. So I'm starting to wonder if maybe, if nothing else, maybe we can come into these foraging bins once in a while and actually try to use moisture to see if we can ensure that the worms are, paying attention to all these leftover scraps and making those into compost as well. I just have to assume that all those materials are at a far enough broken down stage that the worms can be, consuming them. Although I do wonder about something like a leaf stem. I kind of always felt like maybe bacteria or fungi or something else gets in there first to make this stuff soft enough that a worm could nibble away at it. It just seems unlikely that a worm could just like cruise up to a little stick like that and start working it down. It just doesn't seem like they've got the ability to do that. I think they really rely on another earlier form of decomposition to be able to eventually make food out of certain things. So it is kind of nice seeing so many worms hanging out in this stuff, and so much of this stuff is just castings. I didn't really see too many signs of leftover coffee. Something like this might be coffee. It's got this weird kind of chunkiness to it. Yeah, look at it. Definitely tell the difference, right? It's much finer. I did figure if I found any leftover coffee in here too, I would sort of help to disperse it, and by doing so, hopefully increase its chances of getting consumed rather than just sitting there in a thick chunk. But yeah, this stuff definitely flows so nicely, and it's because of that I feel like I don't want to moisten it in a way. I feel like moistening it makes it kind of possibly get a little bit muddy or sticky and gooey and harder to harvest in the end and whatever. But if I focus the moisture to go right on to only those things that I want to see get the attention that they need, then I don't think we'll be making mud out of any nice castings. Hopefully we'll just be applying moisture to the material that really can benefit from it. So I think I've talked myself into it. Let's just go for it. Let's stop stalling. But it is kind of nice to check the material out, kind of break up anything that's a little bit chunky. by doing so, I did at least locate one pretty good sized chunk of coffee that definitely benefited from being fragmented up. But you know, we'll be back in here again. Next time we come in here to feed the other younger bin again, maybe that'll be its 15th feeding the next time we check in. I'm not 100% certain on where that one stands as far as how many feedings it has, but I don't know. 15 to me seems like a pretty good range. You can see when I'm working in here, I do need a little bit of height. I do need a little bit of room to be able to stack stuff up, and even now I'm pretty close to the edge of the bin up here. You know, the very rim of the container is so close to some of the material that I'm stacking up over here that it feels like if I was in a container that was any more full, then I'd be robbing myself of the space that I need to do the stuff that I need to do in here. So, all right, I think we've got a pretty nice collection of stuff that would definitely benefit from a little dose of moisture. So we'll kind of spread it out along the bottom, create like a lower bottom layer, thin enough layer that when I squirt it down, the majority of it gets moistened. Maybe I'll even stir a little moisture into this stuff by getting down here on my glove. I feel like I'm playing in the mud now. Something I don't do that much is apply moisture to my bins. So if you're a regular on my channel, you'll know that that's sort of a foreign sort of activity for me to be applying moisture into a worm bin. It's just I always really rely so heavily on the moisture that gets into the bins with the foods that I feed, and then I try to manage the moisture with, you know, retention and preservation of the existing moisture versus needing to supplement it later. But I'm starting to feel like in this particular case, what we're doing here might just be the trick to making sure that the stuff that we want consumed gets the worm attention that it needs. By putting a bunch of moisture down into here, I got a feeling we're setting ourselves up for some pretty good results. At least I hope. All right. I really didn't think we were going to spend so much time in this bin, chatting and whatnot else, but it was fun. Definitely nice looking material. Just wish it was free of all these little sticks and stems, all these leaf stems. The other moisture retention strategy that I think I hinted at earlier, covering the material with plastic so that it doesn't stay dry on the top surface, so that even the material on the top surface gets a good amount of worm action and the worm activity. That also seems like it might be a pretty good idea. I mean, luckily we've taken a lot of that stuff that was out on the surface that was kind of dry, and we've sunken it down, but it looks like we missed a certain amount of it here too, so we'll just spread it out on top, because I believe that some sort of a plastic covering would be a good idea here. So we'll lay it out, cover the top with plastic, and the whole top will be just drenched as a result of that. So there'll be no material in the bin hardly at all, except around the very edges that's dry. So within a day or two, that terrarium effect will take over, and we'll see a whole lot more moisture going on. And as a result, hopefully a lot more worm traffic right there at the surface too. So in the place of those newspapers and whatnot that was covering things here earlier, we're going to switch over to this piece of bubble wrap, which just happens to be about the right size, leaving some room around the edges for airflow, and right beneath it, creating a space that's going to become nice and damp and humid, and as a result, probably have a good amount of worm traffic and nice fresh castings and everything else going on. So hopefully that's what we see the next time we come in here. And you know what? Just to keep things nice and dark and cozy so they don't feel bashful about coming to the surface, and maybe just to give a little bit of weight there too, we'll put the coverings back on here. And I guess since this stuff was really part of this bin here, I'll keep it here unless I find some other use for it. But let's go get the other bin. Let's get the younger bin that we're actually going to feed today. And for now, this bin just continues foraging, 9 days into the foraging. And we'll see how long we want to let that go until the time comes to begin migration of the worms out of the material. All right, let's go get the other bin. All right. Now here we've got Similar setup as far as the coverings go, paper, cardboard. Usually I try to stick with this type of natural material as a covering so that it permits airflow, but sometimes the use of plastic is just, you know, ideal. So I figured for that other bin, it's probably a good idea to switch to plastic now. So here, same deal. They received coffee, but in here, I believe I had taken, you know, when these things are still in the shape of a cone, like so, I took 3 of these full of coffee, boom, 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 and placed them in here as the feeding last time. Kind of a boring feeding. So I got a feeling we're going to see lots of leftovers. We're definitely going to spread that stuff out, make sure that material's around, you know, spread out throughout the bin for easy access for the worms. And I definitely want to give them something a little bit tastier. Because to me, I don't know, I think I mentioned it in a video earlier this week too, that somehow coffee seems like a boring kind of a worm bin food. Because I don't know, maybe it's just my worms. My worms never seem to react to coffee like it's such a big deal. Maybe it's just because they get it all the time. It's just a staple. Maybe if they received it only once in a while, they'd react differently to it. But it seems like I don't really get a rise out of my worms as a result of feeding them coffee. So I don't expect to see worm balls in here. But you know what? Stranger things have happened. You never know. We could be having a huge coffee party going on here. So we might be in for a big surprise, which would be super cool. These are the shells of some avocados. Here we've just got some paper scraps. I thought it was stuff that was left over from the avocado. It was just some paper that fell into this shell. What else do we have down here? Okay, I think we're bumping into one of the... It almost seems like the worms were almost unable to make a meal out of this stuff. Just a chunk of coffee sitting here on the top. Obviously, you can see some worms hanging out in it on the top surface. So they're obviously able to eat it, but, you know, all that material that's down underneath the top surface is probably just sitting there idle. Seems kind of like a shame. Oh, looks like the filter was breached from below, and worms were also feeding on the stuff from down low. Let's take all this coffee and make sure it's kind of commingled with the neighboring material, so that none of it's hiding, none of it is out of reach, hiding behind a chunk of the stuff. Just want it all out in the open so it could all get nibbled on. You can really see is a good part of the shell is good part of the seed is still in here too. You know, a lot of times you put a mango seed in and the worms go berserk for it, and a lot of times, maybe it's just me, everywhere else on other people's channels I always see so much action on the mango seeds. In mine, somehow doesn't seem like it's such a novelty, but not always. Sometimes I've got good luck with it, just sometimes I don't. It's a little surprising. Yeah, here, look at all this coffee, all this food. It almost seems like a shame to give them too much today. I was going to feed coffee plus something else. Don't know yet. I would just pick something out of the freezer from the worm food storage. But this is almost like we've just never fed them last time. They were able to maybe scrape a little bit of coffee off the top surface and eat that, but I would say, you know, 95% of what I gave them last feeding is all still right here, untouched. So to give them a full-size feeding would seem, I don't know, maybe unwise, you know. Treat this as, you know, part of whatever we're going to give them today, but maybe give them a little something else other than just coffee. Anything. Definitely got some worms hanging out right below where all the food had been. There must have been some bedding materials placed in there underneath. So the worms were down there nibbling on the coffee, hanging out in the bedding, probably nibbling the bedding as well. I would think we'll probably see the same on this side too. Good amount of worms hanging out down low. No mobbing, no parties, no worm balls. And I sort of anticipated that that would be the case here today. And geez, I mean, since the feeding they got 9 days ago pretty much didn't even hardly register here as if it had been a feeding. With that stuff just sitting there idle, it seems like there is no real good reason for these worms to be, you know, mobbing together or creating a worm ball anywhere. I'd really like to change that. I'd like to give them a little treat for kind of my feeding faux pas of just putting a big pile of coffee in here without sort of mixing it in. I guess you live and learn. I just figured they'd be able to somehow get into this stuff. But I was mistaken. But now they should be able to pretty much get at all of it. Oh yeah, there's still this amount of it over here too, so I don't know, whatever. I think I mixed in what was already poured out pretty good. So we'll just try to do the same to the stuff we just added. Take these chunks, break them up. Yeah, definitely a feeding screw up. Should know better. It's all about surface area, and you know, you give them something really fine chopped like coffee grounds, you know, unless it's kind of loose, they've got no way to get at the better part of it except for just what's exposed. So now pretty much all the coffee looks like it's good to go and should be readily available for feeding purposes. I guess this stuff can go in here as just the bedding for whatever food we select, whatever we decide to give them. It won't be much, but I'd like for it to be something pretty special. Maybe banana peels. I got a couple of those. I think they'd appreciate that. What do you think? I'm going to go upstairs to the fridge, go grab them a little something to eat, and I'll be right back. Here we go. They should really enjoy this, right? A couple banana peels, pretty good size bananas. The stem will take a little longer than all the skins, and the skins will take a little while too. But these came fresh out of the freezer. They're completely frozen. And I guess they're going to break into little chunks, so we won't have like these long, full pieces of the peel. We just got little bits and pieces. There's the other stem from the other one. These two pieces, okay, I got them apart. Pretty nice little snack here for these guys. Hopefully they appreciate it. To make it even better, we're going to use some of our crushed eggshell grit so that it's really easy for the worms to eat. And return some of these older pieces of food back down to where they belong, where they're going to hopefully get a little bit of attention, and continue the breakdown process. And, you know, as much as I like having leaves out on the top surface, every time I look at them when I'm building up a feeding zone, to me it seems like the ultimate bedding is right there staring me in the face, because the stuff that's already been in the worm bin for a while, stuff was probably sprinkled out here on the surface during the last feeding 9 days ago, or maybe even longer. So stuff's been sitting out here priming for I don't know how long, days, maybe weeks, making for a really nice material that the worms can just go right for it and nibble it right down. Gosh, I'm so tempted to moisten some of this fairly dry material that I just, yeah, let's do it. Stuff came off the top surface where we typically find a good amount of somewhat dry stuff. So dampening it a little bit, I think, is probably a good idea. Not going to do any harm. And I don't think we're just muddying up a bunch of castings here either. We're doing it for a purpose, moistening up some material that we want to see get some good attention. And if a little bit of the moisture drips down, it's just going to land on some of the coffee that's down below it. So I think we've got ourselves a pretty good 130-day-old bin here, making pretty good progress. It's just all these leaf stems that I really wish I could just collect all through the whole bin, pick them all up and just dump them down low so they're all damp and they're all near the food and they're near the worm traffic. But I think the best bet will just be to, each time we come in here, just take some of these old leaves and make sure they're part of the feeding zone, and perhaps not used so much as just top dressing on the bin. Alright, things look really nice in here too. Good amount of castings everywhere, but also a good amount of bedding, which makes complete sense considering the way I've been really generous with bedding lately. Here in these older bins, I really want to start, slowing down on the application of fresh bedding, giving that stuff a chance to break down, and then try to feed with materials that are going to be pretty quick to break down as well, so that I'm not left waiting for any one particular type of material in the bin to break down over time. So here, the bin feels so nice. Good moisture all throughout. Even though there's a few things that are going to just remain a little bit dry out here on the surface, covering the way we do here, I think we'll be okay. Let's just leave it as is. We'll return this coffee filter to the middle to where it was to show us where we last fed, because we sometimes feed in different locations, but we've been feeding down the middle lately, so we'll just mark it as such and get things covered up again here. So my European night crawlers are all taken care of now. I think we'll be good here for maybe another, at least another 9 days, right? Because all that coffee was supposed to be gone by now, theoretically, but they couldn't access it. And it was all still there, and now we just added 2 banana peels as well, so I would say at least 10 days. We're going to be good to go here. And with the foraging bin, it's got time to get to the point where we want it to be, but I think that covering we put on it is going to help a lot as well. So that's it for today, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.